The stars were quiet that night. They always were in the Vega corridor, far from the busy shipping lanes and crowded stations of the inner systems. Captain stood at the viewport of her ship, the UES Defiant, watching the distant lights of 1,000 suns. She had made this journey many times before, 6 months out to the colonies, 6 months back home. It was simple work, honest work, the kind of work that let her sleep at night. The Defiant was not a warship. It was a cargo frigate, old and tired, held together by patches and prayers. Its hull showed the scars of a dozen repair jobs. Its engines wheezed like an old man climbing stairs, but it flew. It always flew, and in 3 more days it would reach Earth. Turned from the viewport and looked at her bridge crew. There were only 5 of them here, running the night shift. First officer sat at the tactical station, reading something on his personal tablet. Navigation officer hummed a song from his homeland as he checked their course. Communications officer spoke quietly into her headset, sending routine reports to passing relay stations. At the engineering console, a young technician named watched the reactor readouts with sleepy eyes. 47 souls, that was all. 47 humans aboard a ship meant for cargo, not combat. Engineers and medics and cargo handlers. People with families waiting for them. People with simple dreams of home. Smiled, she loved her crew. They were not heroes. They were not soldiers. They were just people doing their jobs, trying to make it through another day in the vast emptiness of space. The alarm changed everything. It started as a soft beep. Then it grew louder. Then every screen on the bridge turned red and a sound like screaming metal filled the air. His coffee cup fell from his hand and shattered on the floor. Jumped to his feet, his tablet forgotten. Pulled off her headset, her eyes wide with fear. Captain said. His voice was steady but could see the terror in his eyes. We have contacts, many contacts, coming out of fold space. Move to the tactical display. The screen showed their little ship as a small blue dot in the center. Around it, like wolves circling a wounded deer, red dots appeared. 1, 5, 10, 20. The number kept growing. How many? Asked. Swallowed hard. 12 capital ships, Dreadnought class, over 200 support vessels. He looked at her. Captain, it's the name hung in the air like a death sentence. Everyone in the galaxy knew they were conquerors, destroyers. They had been expanding their empire for 12,000 years, swallowing civilization after civilization. No one had ever defeated them. No one had ever escaped them. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They simply arrived, demanded surrender, and absorbed everything in their path. And now they were here. Stared at the screen. The largest red dot was moving toward them. It was the flagship, a monster of a ship called the Eternal Theorem. It was 12 kilometers long. It carried enough firepower to burn a planet to glass. Next to it, the Defiant looked like an insect. They're hailing us, said. Her hands were shaking. Put it through. The main screen flickered. A face appeared. It was not a human face. The High Commander was tall and covered in dark chitin like the shell of a beetle. His eyes were black and cold, showing no emotion. When he spoke, his voice was flat and mechanical, translated perfectly into English. Human vessel, you have 30 seconds to power down all systems and surrender unconditionally. Compliance will be rewarded with swift assimilation. Resistance is a mathematical impossibility. The transmission ended. The screen returned to the tactical display, showing those terrible red dots all around them. 30 seconds. Looked at her crew, was crying quietly at her station, had gone pale, was praying under her breath, only met her eyes waiting for orders. Options? Asked. Shook his head. None, Captain. We have no weapons, just point defense turrets for asteroid debris. Our shields are basic. Our engines are damaged from the long journey. He paused. We cannot fight. We cannot run. We cannot hide. 25 seconds. Thought about her daughter back on Earth. Little Maya, only 7 years old, waiting for her mother to come home. She thought about the promise she had made before leaving. I'll be back before your birthday, sweetheart, I promise. She would not keep that promise, she knew that now. 20 seconds. But something else filled her mind. Something her grandfather had told her when she was young. He had been a soldier, a man who had seen the worst of humanity and the best. He had told her about the old days when humans were new to the stars, when every alien species had looked at them with pity and contempt. They called us primitive, he had said. They called us weak. They said we would never survive out there, but we proved them wrong. Do you know how? Not with weapons, not with technology. We survived because we refused to give up, because surrender was never in our blood. 15 seconds. Stood, her fear did not disappear, but something else grew beside it. Something hot and fierce. Something that had been sleeping in her heart all her life, waiting for this moment. She opened the ship-wide communication channel. Her voice echoed through every corridor, every room, every corner of the Defiant. All hands, this is the captain, the want our surrender. They have given us 30 seconds to decide our fate. She took a breath. I will not surrender. I cannot ask you to follow me. What I am about to do will not be in any manual. It will not be approved by command. It may be the most foolish thing any human captain has ever done. 10 seconds. But I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. If anyone wishes to join me, speak now. For a moment there was silence, then spoke, with you, Captain. Then with you. Then with you. Then, wiping her tears, with you, Captain. Through the comm system, voice after voice joined them. Engineers in the cargo bay, medics in the sick ward, crew members in their bunks. Every single person on the Defiant answered the call. 5 seconds. Smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had found something worth dying for. Then let's show them what humans are made of. The countdown reached 0. The 30 seconds had passed. They were waiting for surrender. They would not receive it. On the bridge of the Defiant, something strange was happening. The fear had not left. It was still there, heavy in the chest of every crew member, but it had changed. It had become fuel. It had become fire. Captain watched her people transform before her eyes. These were not soldiers. They had never trained for war. They had never held weapons or planned battles. They were cargo haulers, engineers, medics. They were ordinary people. But in that moment, they became something more. Chief Engineer burst through the bridge doors. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with gray hair and thick glasses. She had spent 30 years keeping old ships alive. She knew the Defiant better than anyone. Captain, she said, breathing hard, I heard your announcement. I know what you're planning. Nodded. Can we do it? Moved to the engineering console and began typing. Numbers flew across the screen. The reactor is old. The engines are damaged. But if I remove all the safety limits, if I push everything past the breaking point, she looked up. We can reach 70% of light speed, maybe more. How long do we have before the engines fail? At that speed, 4 minutes, maybe 5. Turn 2 at the navigation console. Can you plot a collision course? His hands were already moving. His face was pale, but his eyes were focused. The flagship, the eternal theorem, it is the biggest target if we hit it at that speed. He did some quick calculations. The impact will release energy equal to several nuclear bombs. Will it be enough to destroy them? Shook his head. No, their shields are too strong, but it will hurt them. It will hurt them badly, and 3 or 4 of the ships near the flagship might be caught in the explosion. Thought about this. 4 ships, out of over 200, it was nothing, a drop in the ocean. They would lose 4 ships and continue their conquest without pause. But that was not the point. Stepped forward, he understood what was thinking. Captain, this won't stop them, you know that. I know. Then why throw our lives away for nothing? Turned to face him. It's not for nothing, it's never for nothing. She pointed at the tactical display, at the hundreds of red dots surrounding them. They have conquered thousands of species, thousands, and every single one of them surrendered. Every single one of them bowed their heads and accepted their fate. She walked to the center of the bridge. We can't win this fight, we can't even survive it, but we can send a message. We can show the galaxy that humans don't surrender. We can show every conquered species out there that resistance is possible, that even the smallest ship with no weapons and no hope can stand up and fight. Looked up from her communication station. Tears were streaming down her face, but her voice was steady. "Captain, I've been broadcasting everything. Our conversation with your announcement, all of it. It's going out on every open frequency. Anyone within range can hear us." Felt a spark of hope. How far will it reach? Far, very far. The relay stations will pick it up and send it further. By tomorrow, half the galaxy will know what happened here. That was the point. That was the reason. Remembered the history lessons from her school days. She remembered learning about the ancient humans on Earth before they had reached the stars. They had faced impossible odds before. They had fought battles they could not win. And sometimes those battles had changed everything. A small group of soldiers holding a mountain pass against an army. A single man standing in front of a tank. A ship full of refugees refusing to turn back. These moments had not won wars by themselves, but they had inspired others. They had lit fires in the hearts of millions. They had shown the world what courage looked like. Today, the Defiant would become one of those moments. "All hands," announced through the ship-wide comm. "Prepare for ramming speed. Engineering, remove all safety limits on the reactor. Navigation, plot collision course for the enemy flagship. Everyone else, secure yourselves. This is going to be rough." The ship came alive with activity. In the engine room, and her team worked with desperate speed. They disconnected safety systems. They overrode warning protocols. They pushed the old reactor toward its breaking point. In the cargo bay, crew members strapped themselves to whatever they could find. They held hands. They said prayers. Some of them wrote quick messages to their families, hoping the words would somehow survive. On the bridge, wiped her eyes and took her position at the auxiliary console. "Captain, I've never done anything brave in my life. I was always scared. Scared of space, scared of the unknown, scared of everything." Put a hand on her shoulder. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Was at the tactical station, watching the fleet. They're not moving. They're waiting for our surrender. They'll be waiting a long time. Finished his calculations. Course plotted, Captain. At maximum speed, we'll reach the flagship in 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Sat in her captain's chair one last time. She looked around the bridge, at the people who had become her family over the years. She thought about all the journeys they had shared, all the jokes and arguments and quiet moments, all the cups of coffee and late-night conversations. She would miss them, but she would not trade this moment for anything. She said, "Open a channel, wide broadcast. I want everyone to hear this." Nodded, "Channel open, Captain." Took a deep breath. In the next few minutes she would die, but first she would speak, and her words would echo across the stars. To the Dominion, to every ship and station within range, to every species living under conquest, to every human back home, this is Captain of the cargo frigate Defiant. She stood up, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "You gave us 30 seconds to surrender, 30 seconds to decide our fate. You thought we would bow, you thought we would kneel. You were wrong." She felt the deck begin to vibrate as the engines powered up. Humanity does not kneel. We were not born in the stars. We clawed our way up from mud and blood and fire. We survived ice ages and plagues. We survived wars and disasters. We survived ourselves, and we will survive you. The ship lurched forward, throwing everyone against their seats. Remember this day. Remember the Defiant. Remember that when the galaxy told us to bow, we chose to burn." She looked at her crew one last time. "All hands brace for collision." The Defiant screamed toward the enemy fleet like a bullet fired from a gun. Behind them, they left nothing but the echo of their words. Ahead of them, the flagship waited, unaware that the universe was about to change forever. On the bridge of the Eternal Theorem, High Commander watched the human vessel with confusion. This was a new feeling for him. In 800 years of service to the Dominion, he had never been confused. The mathematics of conquest were simple. You find a species. You surround them with overwhelming force. You give them a choice between surrender and death. They always chose surrender. It was logical. It was efficient. It was the way of the universe. But these humans were not following the mathematics. "High Commander," one of his officers reported, "the human vessel is accelerating. They are moving toward us." Tilted his great head. "Moving toward us. They must be attempting to flee in the wrong direction. Their navigation systems may be damaged." "No, High Commander. Their course is precise. They are heading directly for our ship." "That makes no sense. Perhaps they wish to negotiate in person. Open a channel and demand." "High Commander," another officer interrupted. His voice was strange, almost worried. "The human vessel is now traveling at 30% of light speed, 40%. They are still accelerating." Stared at the tactical display. The small blue dot representing the human ship was moving faster than it should, faster than its design allowed, faster than any cargo vessel had ever moved. "What are they doing?" "Unknown, High Commander. But at their current speed and trajectory, they will impact our ship in approximately 3 minutes. For the first time in 800 years, felt something cold in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize the feeling. It was fear. "They're going to ram us," he said slowly. "They're using their own ship as a weapon." The bridge fell silent. Every officer turned to look at their commander. In 12,000 years of Dominion history, no species had ever done this. Surrender was always the logical choice. Death was always avoided when possible. That was the law of the universe. But humans, it seemed, did not follow that law. "High Commander, what are your orders?" His mind raced through calculations. The human ship was small and weak. Its hull was thin. Its mass was nothing compared to the Eternal Theorem. But at 70% of light speed, even a small object carried terrible energy. The impact would not destroy his ship. Nothing could destroy his ship. But it would cause damage. Significant damage. "All weapons, fire on the human vessel. Destroy it before it reaches us." The Eternal Theorem opened fire. Plasma cannons that could melt mountains turned toward the tiny cargo frigate. Energy beams that could cut through planets reached out across the void. Missiles that had shattered 1,000 civilizations screamed through space. On the Defiant, alarms exploded everywhere. The first shot hit the cargo bay, tearing through metal like paper. Air rushed out into the vacuum. Emergency doors slammed shut. 17 crew members died in that first second, their bodies thrown into the cold darkness of space. "Damage report," Captain shouted over the chaos. "Hull breach in sections 7 through 12, yelled back. "We've lost the main cargo bay." Another shot hit the ship, then another. The Defiant shook like a toy in a child's hand. Consoles exploded. Lights flickered and died. Smoke filled the corridors. "We're losing people," reported, his voice cracking. 20 dead, 25 more every second." Gripped her chair. "Hold course, don't change anything." In the engine room, worked through the smoke and fire. A piece of shrapnel had cut her arm, but she ignored the blood. Her team was dying around her. 3 had already stopped moving. 2 more were badly hurt, but the reactor still worked. The engines still burned. "Come on, old girl," whispered to the ship. "Just a little more, just a little further." She pushed more power into the engines. Warning lights flashed red. Temperatures rose past every safe limit. The reactor screamed like a living thing. On the bridge, watched the distance counter drop. 2 minutes to impact, Captain. Another shot hit the ship. This time it was the bridge itself. The ceiling tore open. Cold vacuum pulled at everything. Was thrown from her chair, her headset flying away. She grabbed a console and held on, her lungs burning as the air rushed out. Saw what was happening. She saw struggling, saw the life draining from her eyes. She reached out, trying to help, but she was too far away. Looked at her captain. She smiled. Then she let go of the console and was pulled into space, her body spinning away into the darkness. But her headset still floated nearby, and the broadcast was still running. Grabbed the headset before it could escape. He put it on with shaking hands. The channel is still open, Captain. The galaxy is still listening. Felt tears freezing on her cheeks. The cold was everywhere now. The ship was dying around her, but they were still moving. They were still flying. 1 minute to impact, shouted. On the Eternal Theorem, watched the human ship keep coming. He had hit it dozens of times. He had torn it apart piece by piece. Half of it was missing now. Fire and debris trailed behind it like the tail of a comet. There was no way anyone was still alive in there. But the ship kept coming. Impossible, he whispered. This is impossible. He thought about the humans he had studied. Such a young species. Such a small time among the stars. They had seemed so unremarkable, so easy to conquer. Just another civilization to absorb, another footnote in Dominion history. But they were not unremarkable. He understood that now. 30 seconds to impact, his officer reported. High Commander, we cannot destroy it in time. We must move the ship. Move the ship. The Eternal Theorem, the greatest vessel ever built, running from a dying cargo frigate. The humiliation would be unimaginable. But was old enough to value survival over pride. All engines full reverse, get us out of. He never finished the sentence. On the Defiant, only 4 people remained alive. Her face covered in blood, still holding the broadcast headset. His hands frozen to the navigation console, and somewhere in the wreckage of the engine room, keeping the reactor alive through sheer will. Looked at the viewport. The flagship filled her entire view. It was trying to move, trying to escape, but it was too slow, too big. She said softly, time to impact. 5 seconds, Captain. Closed her eyes. She thought about her daughter, about her grandfather, about every human who had ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of something greater. Tell Maya I love her, she whispered. Then she opened her eyes and faced her destiny. For Earth, for humanity, for the Defiant. The cargo frigate, nothing but a broken shell of fire and metal, struck the flagship at 70% of light speed. For one brief moment, a new star was born in the Vega corridor. And then there was silence. The light was blinding. It reached across 3 star systems, bright enough to be seen from 1 billion kilometers away. Sensors on distant ships and stations recorded the flash, their instruments struggling to measure the impossible energy. Where the Defiant had struck the Eternal Theorem, there was now a wound, a hole torn through 12 kilometers of the most advanced ship in the galaxy. The impact had released energy equal to 100 nuclear explosions, all focused on a single point. The flagship did not die immediately. It was too big, too strong for that. But it was dying. Fire spread through its corridors. Explosions rippled along its hull. Millions of crew members screamed as their world came apart around them. High Commander lived for 37 seconds after the impact. He spent those seconds staring at the destruction around him, trying to understand what had happened. His bridge was gone. His officers were dead. His beautiful ship, the pride of the Dominion, was breaking into pieces. In his final moments, he thought about the human captain. He had never learned her name. He had not thought it worth knowing. She was just another inferior being, just another species to be conquered. But she had done the impossible. She had hurt him. She had beaten him, not with superior weapons or advanced technology, but with something he could not calculate, something his mathematics could not predict. Will, pure, stubborn, irrational will. Died without understanding, and perhaps that was the most human victory of all. 3 other dreadnoughts were caught in the explosion. The silent equation and the perfect variable were too close to escape. They were torn apart by the shockwave, their mighty hulls crumbling like paper in a fire. The absolute constant tried to flee, but a piece of debris the size of a building struck its reactor. The resulting explosion added to the chaos. 4 capital ships, over 1 million lives, gone in an instant. The rest of the armada pulled back in shock. They had come here expecting an easy conquest. They had expected surrender and compliance as always. Instead, they found themselves staring at the burning remains of their flagship. Admiral Al, now the highest-ranking officer in the fleet, stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the fire. He was old even by standards. He had seen many battles. He had witnessed many victories. But he had never seen anything like this. "Admiral," one of his officers said carefully, "what are your orders? Do we continue the advance toward the human territories?" Al did not answer immediately. He was thinking about the broadcast. The human captain's words were still echoing in his mind. He had heard them, as had every ship in the fleet, as had every relay station in range. Humanity does not kneel. Such simple words, such a simple message, and yet they carried a weight that no weapon could match. "Admiral." Al turned away from the viewport. "We retreat." The officer stared at him. "Retreat? But Admiral, we still have overwhelming force. We can still." "Still what? Still conquer a species that would rather die than surrender." Al shook his head. "You did not listen to her words. You did not understand what happened here today." He walked to the center of the bridge, his old legs heavy with exhaustion. "The Dominion has conquered thousands of species. We have ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years, and in all that time we have never faced true resistance. Every species calculated the odds and chose survival. Every species bowed to our superior force." He paused. "But these humans do not calculate the way we do. They do not value survival above all else. They have something else, something dangerous." "What is that, Admiral?" "Conviction, belief, a willingness to die for something greater than themselves." Al looked at the burning remains of the flagship. Today, 47 humans in a cargo ship destroyed the greatest vessel in our fleet. 47. Can you imagine what 1 billion of them could do? Can you imagine facing an entire species that thinks this way? The bridge was silent. "No," Al said finally. "We will not continue to human space. Not today. We will return to Dominion territory and report what happened here. The High Council must know. They must understand what we are dealing with." The fleet turned and began to move away. For the first time in 12,000 years, they retreated from a battle. But the story did not end there. It was only beginning. The broadcast from the Defiant traveled at the speed of light across the galaxy. It passed through relay stations and communication networks. It was and shared and transmitted again. Within hours, it had reached every human colony. Within days, it had spread to alien worlds that had long ago accepted rule. On the conquered planet of Prime, a young alien named listened to the broadcast in a hidden basement. He was a member of a species that had surrendered to the Dominion 300 years ago. His people had given up hope long ago. They worked as slaves and servants, accepting their fate as unchangeable. But as he listened to Captain speak, something stirred inside him, something that had been sleeping for generations. "Remember that when the galaxy told us to bow, we chose to burn." Looked at his friends gathered in the darkness. They were all slaves. They had all accepted their chains. But now, for the first time, they were looking at each other differently. "If humans can resist," said slowly, "why can't we?" No one answered, but no one disagreed either. On 1,000 conquered worlds, similar scenes played out. Beings who had forgotten how to hope began to remember. Beings who had accepted defeat began to question. The broadcast was like a spark landing on dry wood. It did not create fire immediately, but it created the conditions for fire. And on Earth, the news arrived like a thunderbolt. 7-year-old Maya was sitting in her classroom when her teacher received an urgent message. The teacher's face went pale. Then she looked at Maya with tears in her eyes. "Maya," she said softly, "you need to come with me." Maya did not understand, not at first. She was taken to the principal's office where her grandmother was waiting. Her grandmother was crying. Everyone was crying. "Where's Mommy?" Maya asked. Her grandmother knelt down and hugged her tight. "Your mother was a hero, Maya, the bravest hero in the whole galaxy." Maya still did not understand. She would not understand for many years. But one day she would. One day she would learn exactly what her mother had done. And on that day she would feel not just sadness but pride. Because her mother had shown the universe what humans were made of. In the Vega corridor where the Defiant had made its final stand, debris floated silently through space. Pieces of metal and plastic, frozen fragments of what had once been a ship, and somewhere among the wreckage, floating undamaged by some miracle, was a small metal plaque. It was the nameplate from the captain's quarters. It said simply, "U.S. Defiant Captain." That plaque would be found weeks later by a salvage crew. It would be returned to Earth, where it would be placed in the most important museum in the world. And beneath it, they would write the words that had spoken in her final moments. Humanity does not kneel. 1 year had passed since the Defiant burned across the stars. The galaxy was no longer the same. Something had changed in those 30 seconds when Captain refused to surrender. Something had shifted in the hearts and minds of countless beings across 1,000 worlds. It started slowly. Small rebellions on conquered planets, protests and demonstrations that they had never seen before, workers who refused to work, slaves who refused to obey. The Dominion sent soldiers to crush these uprisings as they always had. But this time, the resistance did not end. For every rebellion they destroyed, 2 more appeared. On Prime led his people out of the mines where they had worked for 300 years. They killed many of them, but the survivors kept fighting. They had watched the recording of the Defiant's last moments 1,000 times. They had memorized its words. They had learned what resistance truly meant. "If 47 humans can stand against an armada," told his followers, "then we can stand against our masters." Similar movements grew across the Dominion. Species that had accepted conquest for centuries began to question their fate. They had always relied on the mathematics of fear. Overwhelming force equals surrender. It was a simple equation that had worked for 12,000 years. But humans had broken that equation, and once it was broken, it could never be fixed. The High Council gathered to discuss the crisis. They were the oldest and of their kind rulers of an empire that spanned galaxies. They had never faced a problem they could not solve, but this was different. "The rebellions are spreading," the eldest council member reported. "We have lost control of 17 systems in the past 3 months. Our military is stretched thin trying to maintain order." "We should have destroyed the humans immediately," another member said. "We should have attacked there before this sickness could spread." "And face more ships like the Defiant," Admiral Al stood before the council, his voice heavy with experience. "You did not see what I saw. You did not witness what they are capable of. The humans are not like other species. They do not calculate survival the way we do. They calculate something else. Legacy, meaning, honor. These are foolish concepts, irrational." "Yes, and that is why they are dangerous." Al stepped forward. "The Dominion has always won because our enemies could be predicted. We knew they would choose to live. We knew they would surrender when faced with certain death. But humans," he shook his head, "humans choose differently, and their choice has inspired others to do the same." The council debated for hours. In the end, they reached a conclusion that would have been unthinkable 1 year ago. They would not attack humanity. They would not seek revenge for the destruction of the eternal theorem. Instead, they would watch. They would wait. And they would try to understand these strange beings who had changed everything. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity was dealing with its own transformation. The story of the Defiant had spread to every corner of human civilization, had become more than a hero. She had become a symbol. Her face appeared on murals and statues. Her words were taught in schools. Her sacrifice was remembered in songs and poems that echoed across the colonies. But the effects went deeper than fame. Something had awakened in humanity, a pride that had been sleeping, a confidence that had been missing. For 3 centuries, humans had been new to the galaxy. They had been treated as children, primitive beings who barely understood the technology they used. Other species had looked down on them, mocked them, dismissed them as temporary, a flash of civilization that would burn out quickly. Now those same species looked at humans differently. There was respect in their eyes, and sometimes there was fear. 17 alien species sent representatives to Earth. They came from worlds that had been conquered by the worlds that were still fighting for freedom, worlds that had simply watched and learned. They all wanted the same thing. Alliance. Maya, now 8 years old, stood in the crowd as the treaty was signed. Her grandmother held her hand. They watched as humans and aliens shook hands and made promises to stand together against any threat. "Why did Mommy have to die?" Maya asked quietly. Her grandmother knelt down beside her. "So that we could live, sweetheart, so that we could be free." Maya did not fully understand. She would not understand for many years, but she held her grandmother's hand and watched as history unfolded before her. The human alliance was born that day. It was not the largest power in the galaxy. It was not the strongest, but it had something that no other civilization possessed. It had the legend of the Defiant. It had the example of what ordinary humans could do when pushed to the edge. And in the years that followed, that legend would only grow. Ships from across the Alliance traveled to the Vega corridor, to the place where the Defiant had made its stand. They built a memorial there, a great station of glass and metal that floated among the stars. At its center was the recovered nameplate of Captain, along with the names of all 47 crew members who had given their lives. Visitors came from every corner of the galaxy. Some were human, many were not. They came to see the place where the impossible had happened. They came to read the words carved into the memorial wall. "We are the ones who choose." And beneath those words, a longer message, the final part of broadcast preserved forever. They expected us to calculate the odds. They didn't realize we'd calculated the legacy. To anyone listening, remember this: surrender is always an option. It is the safe option, the logical option, but it is not the only option. You can also fight. You can also resist. You can also stand up and say no to anyone who tries to take your freedom. We are the Defiant, and we choose to burn. 3 years after the incident, the Dominion sent a transmission to Earth. It was the first official communication between the two powers since the ultimatum that had started everything. It contained only 3 words. "What are you?" The human alliance spent weeks debating how to respond. Diplomats argued. Politicians fought. Scientists analyzed every possible message. In the end, they chose the simplest answer, the truest answer. They sent back 2 words. "We choose." They never responded, but they also never attacked. For the first time in 12,000 years, they had encountered something their mathematics could not solve. A species that valued choice over survival. A species that measured victory not in enemies destroyed, but in principles defended. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as the strongest or the most advanced, but as the species that refused to kneel, as the civilization that would rather burn than bow. And across the galaxy, in hidden basements and secret meetings, On conquered worlds and free stations, beings of every shape and size repeated the words that had changed everything. The words of a simple cargo captain who had been given 30 seconds to decide her fate. Humanity does not kneel. The echo of the defiant would never fade. It would ring across the stars forever, reminding the universe that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to stand anyway. It is the decision to fight when fighting seems hopeless. It is the belief that some things are worth dying for. 47 ordinary people on a broken cargo ship had taught the galaxy that lesson. And the galaxy would never forget.